After my goddamn bypass surgery, I tapped a message into our family chat. Who can get me from the hospital? My son, Jake, shot back. Grab a fucking Uber. I'm in the middle of a game. My wife, Evelyn, added her 2 cents. Do us a favor and stay there for another month. It's been paradise without you. But when they saw my face splashed across the 6 o'clock news that night, their 67 frantic calls went straight to hell. My voicemail. What I did changed everything. And before I tell you what happened next, do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button and drop a comment telling me what you think they deserved. Go on. Don't be shy. It helps the channel more than you could possibly imagine. The pain wasn't just pain. It was a cosmic betrayal. A supernova erupting in my chest, splitting me atom by atom. My eyes shot open, assaulted by a sterile, unforgiving white light that pulsed against the inside of my skull like a war drum. The world was a spinning vortex of white walls, hysterically beeping machines, and a jungle of plastic tubes snaking from my body. I was an old tree, unwillingly tethered to this synthetic forest. I tried to sit up. A scream, hot and silent, ripped through my being. Every muscle, every nerve ending howled in protest. Something was catastrophically wrong. My chest felt like someone had pried my ribs apart with a crowbar and was still rooting around inside. Peeking beneath the flimsy hospital gown, I saw the thick, mummy-like bandages wrapped tight around my torso. A cage for the shattered thing within. Mr. Miller, you're awake. A woman materialized beside my bed, a white coat draped over her like an angel's wings, or maybe a vulture's. Her eyes, magnified by wire-rimmed glasses, held a practiced kindness. I'm Dr. Evans, your cardiologist. How are you feeling? Like I went 10 rounds with a freight train and lost. My voice was a stranger's, a rasping death rattle from a throat rubbed raw with intubation tubes. What happened? She glanced at the monitor beside me, a flickering tapestry of numbers and lines that meant nothing to me, but held the entire story of my continued existence. Her expression remained a mask of professional calm. You underwent emergency cardiac surgery 3 days ago, Mr. Miller. Quadruple bypass. During the procedure, your heart stopped. You were gone for 52 seconds. 52 seconds. The words didn't just echo. They fell into the deep, dark well of my consciousness, each one making a cold, lonely splash. Gone. Was I dead? Clinically, yes, she confirmed, as if discussing the weather. But we were able to bring you back. Her cool fingers pressed against my wrist, a silent communion with my pulse. The surgery was a success, Arthur. You're going to be okay. We'll keep you here for about 2 weeks for recovery, then you can begin a gradual return to your life. 2 weeks. I surveyed the sterile confines of my world again. A small window offered a bleak view of a Chicago suburb under the oppressive gray sky of February. The bedside table was barren, no gaudy balloons, no saccharine greeting cards, no wilting flowers. There was no sign that a single soul on earth knew or cared that I was clinging to life in this room. A nurse bustled in, her name tag reading, Maria. She had a smile that reached her eyes and hands that moved with a gentle confidence as she fiddled with the IV drip feeding life-sustaining fluids into my arm. Mr. Miller, I'm Maria. I'll be looking after you today. Are you in much pain? I could only nod, not trusting my voice to form a coherent word. The simple act of acknowledging the agony made it feel more real. She made a quick notation on her chart and adjusted something on my IV pole. Within minutes, a blessed chemical wave washed over me, softening the jagged edges of the pain into a dull, manageable throb. Dr. Evans pulled a chair closer. Arthur, I need to ask a few questions just to check your cognitive function post-anesthesia. What year is it? 2026. Good. And the month? February. The word felt like a stone in my mouth. Excellent. Now can you squeeze my hands for me? She held them out, and I gripped them. My hands, which had once fixed engines and built bookshelves, felt as weak as a newborn's. But she nodded, a small approving smile on her face. Motor functions look good. Your memory seems perfectly intact. She stood, her attention already shifting to the tablet in her hand. The next few days are critical. We'll manage the pain and get you started on some gentle physical therapy. We'll have you walking the halls before you know it. When she left, the silence descended again, broken only by the rhythmic symphony of the machines that were now my constant companions. With a careful, deliberate effort that sent sparks of pain across my chest, I reached for the bedside table where a plastic bag held my worldly belongings. My fingers, clumsy and numb, found my phone. The screen lit up, a torrent of notifications flooding the display. News alerts about a world that had continued spinning without me. Spam emails, pharmacy refill reminders. I scrolled, my thumb moving with a desperate urgency, searching for a sign. A missed call from Evelyn, a text message from Jake. Nothing. I opened the family group chat, the digital graveyard of our communication. The last message was from 4 weeks ago, Evelyn complaining that the grocery store had, yet again, failed to stock her favorite brand of imported olive oil. Before that, a message from Jake, asking if I could float him a couple $100 for a new graphics card. Not a single word about my sudden, violent departure from our home in an ambulance. Not a single query about my well-being. My hand trembled as I set the phone down. I stared up at the perforated acoustic tiles of the ceiling, each tiny hole a mocking eye staring back at me. 52 seconds of death. And apparently not a single person in my family had even noticed I was gone. The antiseptic hospital smell, a scent of bleach and despair, began to dredge up memories I had spent years burying. It began subtly, as most disasters do. The summer of 2021. I was out in the yard of our Northwood home, wrestling with a stubborn oak tree stump, the humid Illinois air thick as a blanket. The first warning shot, a tightness in my chest, a phantom hand squeezing the air from my lungs. I'd leaned against the garden fence, gasping, telling myself it was just the heat, that I wasn't as young as I used to be. "Art, don't be so dramatic," Evelyn had called from the cool comfort of the screened-in porch, a sweating glass of iced tea in her hand. "Come inside before you give yourself a stroke." I'd laughed it off, of course, 65 years old, but I still thought I was indestructible. An old ox who just needed a bit more water. But the phantom hand kept returning. By 2023, the stairs to our bedroom became my Everest. I'd have to pause on the landing, my knuckles white as I gripped the banister, my heart playing a frantic drum solo against my ribs. Evelyn, already propped up in bed with her tablet, wouldn't even look up from her latest streaming obsession. "You're getting old, Art," she'd murmur. "Maybe it's time to hang up the tool belt." I never told her about the coppery, metallic taste that filled my mouth during the worst of it, or the disorienting vertigo that would sweep over me if I stood up too quickly. Her life was so full, so busy with her charity luncheons and book club politics. What right did I have to burden her with my body's slow betrayal? Jake was even less help. When I'd tried to explain the bone-deep fatigue that had become my constant companion, he'd barely glanced up from his fortress of monitors in the basement. "Sucks, Dad. You should probably see a doctor or something. But, try some of those gummy vitamins first. Copays are brutal." 37 years old, living rent-free in my basement, and his first thought was how my declining health might inconvenience his inheritance. The first major cardiac event, the one they called a warning heart attack, happened on a crisp Tuesday morning in October of 2025. I was making coffee, the rich aroma filling the kitchen, when the sledgehammer hit my chest. My knees buckled. I clutched the edge of the granite countertop, scattering coffee grounds across the gleaming floor as I slid into a heap. "Evelyn!" I'd croaked, but the sound was swallowed by the cavernous silence of the house. She found me 10 minutes later, still crumpled on the cold tile, breath coming in shallow, ragged bursts. "Arthur, for heaven's sake, did you slip?" Her concern was fleeting, her hands helping me into a kitchen chair before her attention had already drifted. "Look, I have a hair appointment in 30 minutes that I simply cannot miss. Can you manage to drive yourself to urgent care?" I drove myself to the emergency room. The tests confirmed what I'd spent years denying. My arteries were closing up like ancient, rusted pipes. "Without surgery, you're looking at 6 months, maybe less," Dr. Martinez had explained in November, his face grim. "With a quadruple bypass, you could get another 15, maybe 20 good years." 15 good years. The question that echoed in my head on the drive home was whether I wanted to spend a single one of them with people who wouldn't notice if I died making coffee on the kitchen floor. The creak of my hospital room door pulled me back to the present. It was Maria, the nurse with the kind eyes. "How are we feeling, Mr. Miller?" "Just thinking," I whispered, gesturing vaguely at the phone on the table. She nodded with a sad, knowing look. "Surgery gives you a lot of time to think. Sometimes that's a good thing, and sometimes it's not." After she left, my eyes were drawn back to the family group chat icon on my phone. My finger hovered over it. 2 weeks of utter silence. But doubt, that persistent weed, began to sprout. Maybe they didn't know. Maybe the hospital bungled the contact information. Maybe, just maybe, after 45 years of marriage and raising a son, there was still a shred of hope that it all meant something. The morning of February 28th dawned with a deceptive, brilliant clarity. Sunlight glinting off the icy branches of the trees outside my window. Liberation Day. I packed my meager belongings into a well-worn duffel bag Evelyn had given me for my 50th birthday. My reading glasses, a paperback thriller I hadn't touched, pajamas that still carried the faint, ghost scent of a home that was no longer mine. The stitches in my chest pulled with every movement, a sharp reminder of my body's trauma. But the crushing, vice-like pain had subsided into a dull, manageable ache. Dr. Evans had signed my discharge papers with a parting warning. "You got a second chance, Arthur. Don't waste it." For the 20th time that morning, my thumb swiped my phone's screen awake. Still nothing. A digital void where a family should have been. Maybe they were planning a surprise. Maybe they felt awkward, unsure of what to say. After all, I had always been the fixer, the crisis manager. I'd driven Evelyn to the ER for her burst appendix. I'd set Jake's broken arm. Perhaps they simply didn't know the protocol when the stoic pillar of the family was the one who had crumbled. With a trembling finger, I typed out a message in our group chat. "Hi everyone, the hospital is discharging me today. Feeling much better. Can't wait to see you. No. Too needy. Delete. I'm being released today. Looking forward to getting home." Still not right. Too emotional. 3rd time's the charm. "Hospital says I can come home today. Who can come get me?" Short. To the point, not a plea, but a simple logistical question. My finger hovered over the send icon. It felt reasonable, hopeful, but not desperate. I pressed send and placed the phone on the starched white sheets, my heart, my newly plumbed, surgically repaired heart, beating a little faster with anticipation. The reply came with sickening speed. Jake's name popped up first. "Grab a fucking Uber, I'm in the middle of a game." I read it once, then twice. My brain struggled to process the casual cruelty. 52 seconds of clinical death, 2 weeks recovering from having my chest sawed open, and my son, my only child, couldn't be bothered to hit the pause button. But Evelyn would be different. 45 years, a shared history, a lifetime. She would understand. Her message appeared a moment later, a gut punch that stole the air from my lungs. Do us a favor and stay there for another month. It's been paradise without you. The phone slipped from my numb fingers, landing softly on the blanket. The words glowed on the screen, a neon epitaph for my marriage, my family, for the entire life I had so carefully, so foolishly constructed. I sank onto the edge of the bed, my duffel bag slumping to the floor beside me. The brilliant morning sun now seemed like a cruel joke. My chest ached with a pain that no surgeon could ever fix. This was a deeper wound, a cancer of the soul. Maria appeared at the door, clipboard in hand. She took one look at my ashen face and immediately stepped inside, pulling the door quietly shut behind her. Mr. Miller. Arthur, are you having chest pains? I shook my head, unable to speak. Her eyes fell to the phone on the bed. She picked it up, her professional mask crumbling into one of pure human sadness. Oh, Arthur, she said softly. I am so sorry. Complicated wasn't the right word. Parasitic was closer. I had spent 45 years of my life as a host organism, providing sustenance and shelter for a family who saw me as nothing more than a convenient resource, a presence whose absence was a relief. I looked down at the discharge papers scattered across the bed. Instructions for a new life. As I sat there, her words, "It's been paradise without you," replaying in my head, those papers began to transform. They were no longer medical instructions. They were a declaration of independence. I walked out of Northwood Memorial Hospital on legs that felt like they belonged to another man. The cold February air was a shock to my system, each breath a sharp reminder that I was alive, and that nobody gave a damn. The taxi driver, a weathered man with tired, kind eyes, glanced at me in the rearview mirror. Tough stay at the hospital, pal? Tough 45 years, the words escaped before I could stop them. He met my gaze in the mirror, a flicker of understanding passing between us. As the taxi slid into traffic, the crinkle of the discharge papers in my pocket felt like the rustling of old ghosts. 1983. I was 28, and I'd just bought the love of my life, a gleaming chrome and steel Harley Davidson. That bike wasn't just a machine. It was freedom. It was the wind in my hair and the roar of a V-twin engine that drowned out all the worries of a young man trying to make his way in the world. Then Evelyn got pregnant. "The bike has to go, Art," she'd said, Jake a small, squirming bundle in her arms. "Babies need a nursery, not a noisy motorcycle." I traded my freedom for $3,000 and a used crib. The taxi passed a motorcycle shop, a row of new Harleys glinting in the winter sun, and my surgical scars burned with the memory of that sacrifice. "Family's tough," the driver grunted, a philosopher of the city streets. "Tell me about it." Another ghost surfaced. 1999. 15 years late, but we were finally going to take our honeymoon. Paris in the spring. I'd worked double shifts for a year, squirreling away every spare dollar. The tickets were bought, the hotel booked. Then Jake got his acceptance letter to a private university we couldn't afford. "The tuition is due, Art," Evelyn had said, her tears theatrically splashing onto the glossy travel brochures before she ripped them in half. "Our son's future is more important than Paris." The Paris dream was tucked away in a box, alongside my motorcycle key. The taxi wound its way downtown, past the gleaming skyscrapers where I'd worked my life away in a cubicle. I remembered driving this same route in 2012, running on 3 hours of sleep and cheap coffee, pulling another 70-hour week to cover the loan for Jake's failed startup. "When do I get to rest?" I'd asked her one night, collapsing into my worn-out recliner. "When Jake is settled," she'd promised, "then it will be our time." But Jake was never settled. He always needed a little more help, a little more seed money, a little more of my life's savings. We turned onto the familiar streets of my own neighborhood, a landscape of my life's quiet compromises. Past the elementary school where I'd coached Jake's Little League team, past the park where Evelyn and I had walked hand in hand when she still looked at me like I was a hero and not just a walking, talking bank account. "Someone meeting you?" the driver asked as we approached my house. The words from the text messages seared themselves into my brain again. "Grab a fucking Uber. Paradise without you." "No," I said, my voice clear and steady. "I think I'm done being picked up." There it was. The 2-story colonial I'd bought and paid for, the lawn I'd meticulously maintained. It should have felt like coming home. Instead, it looked like a 45-year crime scene, and I was the only victim. I paid the driver, stepped onto the sidewalk, and looked at the monument to my own foolishness. The key felt alien in my hand. It turned in the lock with a soft final click. I pushed the door open and stepped out of the cold February air and into the chilling reality of my life. The entryway was a disaster zone. A mountain of mail, unopened bills, takeout menus, credit card offers, was avalanching off the side table. Evelyn's expensive boots were kicked off in the middle of the floor, alongside a pair of Jake's mud-caked sneakers. The living room was worse. It was the epicenter of their liberation. Jake's gaming station had metastasized, sprawling across half the room. A precarious pyramid of empty energy drink cans teetered on the coffee table I'd inherited from my father. Greasy pizza boxes were stacked beside my recliner. They hadn't just been living here, they'd been reveling. My absence was not a void to be mourned, but a vacuum to be filled with their own selfish comforts. The kitchen confirmed it. A sink overflowing with crusted dishes. The trash can spilling over with takeout containers from restaurants I'd always deemed too extravagant. The refrigerator, once stocked with sensible groceries, was now filled with artisanal cheeses, craft beer, and 2 bottles of champagne. They'd been celebrating. But it was my study, my one sanctuary in the house, that felt like the ultimate violation. They had turned it into a glorified storage locker. Boxes of Evelyn's abandoned craft projects were piled on my antique desk. Jake's obsolete computer hardware was stacked on the shelves, obscuring the family photos. A thick layer of dust covered everything. 52 seconds I had been dead, and in the weeks since, my personal space had become their dumping ground. I sank into my leather office chair, the only surface not covered in their detritus. I knew the combination to the small safe hidden behind a bookshelf: Jake's birthday. The irony was a bitter pill. Inside, my last will and testament sat in its crisp blue folder. I pulled it out. My hands, miraculously, were steady. To my beloved wife, Evelyn Miller, I bequeath our home and all personal property. To my son, Jake Miller, I bequeath all financial assets and investments. Beloved wife. I let out a short, sharp laugh that sounded like breaking glass in the dusty silence. The woman who found it paradise without me. My son, the man who couldn't pause a video game to pick up his father from the hospital. I stared at the wedding photo on my desk. A young couple, blissfully unaware of the long, slow erosion to come. Then at a photo of Jake as a boy, a gap-toothed grin on his face. In every photo I was there, smiling, providing, protecting, the family fool. My fingers flew across my phone's keyboard, typing "Estate Planning Attorney Chicago" into the search bar. The screen filled with names. At the top of the list, Grant, Peterson, and Finch, specializing in family trusts and charitable endowments. I looked around my violated sanctuary one last time. At the dust, the boxes, the silent testament to my family's profound disrespect. Then I looked at the will in my hand. Tomorrow, I would call Mr. Finch. Tonight, I would draft the plans for my new life, a life where I was the sole beneficiary. The elevator ascended, a glass and steel cage lifting me 15 floors above the bustling Chicago streets. Each chime marking a floor past felt like a step closer to severing a 45-year-old anchor chain. It had been a week since my homecoming, a week of sleeping in the guest room, of meticulously documenting the state of the house, of quietly gathering every financial statement, deed, and investment portfolio I possessed. A week of research that had led me to a local charity called the Second Chance Heart Foundation, a group that provided temporary housing and support for the families of cardiac patients, families who actually showed up. The elevator doors slid open onto a hushed corridor of polished mahogany and brass nameplates. A receptionist with a headset and a polite smile looked up. "Mr. Miller, Mr. Finch is expecting you." Robert Finch's office was a corner suite with a panoramic view of the city skyline. He was in his late 50s, with a calm, discerning gaze that seemed to miss nothing. He gestured to a plush leather chair. "Arthur, please sit. Your email was direct. You wish to completely restructure your estate." I sat, placing my meticulously organized folder on his desk. "I want to disinherit my wife and son. I want to leave every last cent to the Second Chance Heart Foundation." One of his silver eyebrows arched slightly. "That's a significant revision. May I ask what precipitated this change of heart?" I told him everything. The years of neglect, the surgery, the 52 seconds of death, the empty hospital room, the text messages that had served as my wake-up call, and the pigsty I'd returned home to. He listened patiently, making notes on a yellow legal pad, his expression unreadable. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair. "Arthur, I am legally obligated to ask, is this decision being made out of anger? In the aftermath of a major medical trauma, emotions can—" "Mr. Finch," I interrupted, my voice devoid of the anger he expected. "This isn't an emotional decision. It's a mathematical one. I've had a week for the anger to burn off. What's left is clarity." I pushed the folder across the desk. In there you'll find bank statements, records of loans I've made to my son that were never repaid, and estimates of my wife's spending on non-essentials over the past decade. It's an investment portfolio of my life. The returns have been abysmal. It's time to invest in something that provides actual value. He spent 20 minutes silently reviewing the documents. "You are very thorough," he finally said, looking at me with a new level of respect. "The foundation is an excellent choice. Your gift would be transformative for them." He explained the mechanics, a charitable remainder trust. I would retain the right to live in my house and receive a modest monthly stipend for my living expenses. Upon my death, the entire estate would transfer to the foundation. It was perfect. A clean, legal amputation. "What about a token bequest for your wife and son?" Finch suggested gently. "Sometimes, leaving a single dollar can prevent the will from being contested on the grounds of accidental omission." "No." The word was sharp, final. "They've received their inheritance already, year by year, for the last 45 years. Their account is closed." Finch studied my face for a long moment, then nodded. "Very well. I'll have the documents drafted immediately. It will take my staff about an hour." He paused. "Are you absolutely certain?" I thought of Jake's text message. I thought of Evelyn's. "Mr. Finch," I said, "after 52 seconds of being dead, this is the first thing I've been absolutely certain of." An hour later, I was seated at his conference table. 2 paralegals I'd never met were brought in as witnesses. Robert Finch laid the freshly printed documents before me, the crisp paper smelling of ink and finality. This document revokes all previous wills and codicils, he explained formally. It establishes a trust naming you as the lifetime beneficiary and the Second Chance Heart Foundation as the ultimate heir to all assets listed. I read every single word. No mention of Evelyn. No loophole for Jake. It was a masterpiece of legal precision. I picked up the heavy black pen. My signature, once shaky in the hospital, was now firm and resolute. 45 years of servitude, undone with a few strokes of ink. I will notify the foundation of your intended gift, Finch said, as he handed me a certified copy. Their executive director, a woman named Catherine Vale, will almost certainly want to meet with you. They have a very savvy media relations department. A donation of this magnitude, they'll want to publicize it. Media. Publicity. A strange, vindictive thrill shot through me. My quiet, personal justice could become a very public lesson. Their offices are just a few floors down, in this very building, Finch added. I can have my assistant call ahead for you. 3 floors down, I stepped out of the elevator into the offices of the Second Chance Heart Foundation. The walls were covered with photos of smiling families, of children visiting their parents in the hospital, of handwritten thank you notes. This was a place built on gratitude. A woman with a warm, energetic smile and sharp, intelligent eyes emerged from an office. Mr. Miller, I'm Catherine Vale. Robert Finch just called. Please, come in. What you're planning to do, it's breathtaking. Her office wasn't grand, but it was filled with stories. Newspaper clippings about fundraisers, awards for community service. She understood the power of a narrative. I sat down and told her mine. All of it. The surgery, the abandonment, the texts. She listened, her expression shifting from gratitude to a kind of righteous fury on my behalf. This isn't just a donation, Arthur, she said when I had finished. This is a testimony. Your story can inspire people to give, yes, but more importantly, it can wake people up. It can save another family from making the same mistakes. She picked up her phone. Sarah, get me Kevin from Channel 5 News. I've got a story that's going to break hearts and open wallets. The television crew arrived at my house that afternoon. I sat in my own living room, the one so recently desecrated by pizza boxes and apathy, and told my story to a sympathetic reporter named Cynthia. They filmed the empty rooms, the pristine study, the family photos on the mantelpiece that now felt like relics from another man's life. And what was your reaction when you read those messages from your family? Cynthia asked, her voice soft with practiced empathy. I looked directly into the camera lens. I realized that for 45 years, I'd been confusing obligation with love, and I realized, I paused, letting the weight of the words settle, that 52 seconds of being dead had taught me more about life than the previous 68 years combined. The segment was scheduled to air at 6 o'clock that evening. Catherine Vale from the foundation was ecstatic. This will be our most successful fundraising campaign ever, she'd buzzed over the phone. But I wasn't thinking about fundraising. I was thinking about Evelyn and Jake, sitting down in front of the television for their nightly news, completely oblivious to the public reckoning that was about to hit them like a tidal wave. For the first time since my surgery, I felt a profound sense of peace. The scales of justice, so long unbalanced, were about to be righted. The 6 o'clock news was, as usual, just ambient noise in the Miller household. Evelyn was scrolling through her tablet, half watching a home renovation show, while Jake, headphones on, was deeply engrossed in a multiplayer battle, his rapid-fire commands to unseen teammates filling the living room. This town is so boring, Jake grumbled during a brief lull in his game. Literally nothing ever happens. At least we have some peace and quiet, Evelyn replied, without looking up. God, remember how your father used to drone on about interest rates and the stock market? So tedious. The local news anchor's voice cut through their casual disdain. And in our top local story tonight, a Northwood man is making headlines with an extraordinary act of philanthropy. But it's the heartbreaking story behind the donation that has everyone talking. Jake's headphones slipped from one ear. The house on the television screen was uncannily familiar. White colonial siding, black shutters, the old oak tree he'd crashed his bike into when he was 7. "Mom," he said, his voice a low whisper. "Mom, that's our house." Evelyn's tablet clattered to the floor. They stared, frozen, as the camera panned slowly across their front porch. Then my face filled the screen. Their father, Art Miller, looking calmer and more resolved than they had seen him in years. "Oh my God," Evelyn breathed. They listened in a state of shared, horrified paralysis as I laid out the raw, unvarnished truth. The emergency surgery, the 52 seconds of clinical death, the empty hospital room. When I asked for a ride home, my televised voice said, level and clear, "My son told me to grab a fucking Uber because he was in the middle of a game. My wife of 45 years suggested I stay another month because her life was paradise without me." Jake's face drained of all color. Those were his exact, damning words, broadcast for the entire metropolitan area to hear. Evelyn's hand flew to her mouth, a choked sob escaping her lips as her own cruel message was repeated back to her from the television. "This is a nightmare," she shrieked, her voice thin and reedy. "He can't do this. This is our home." The segment continued, showing footage of me signing documents in Robert Finch's office, followed by an interview with Catherine Vale from the Second Chance Heart Foundation, who graciously accepted the donation of my entire estate. My name, my assets. There was no mention of them. "Call him," Evelyn commanded, her composure shattering. "Call him right now." Jake fumbled for his phone, his hands trembling so badly he could barely unlock the screen. The call went immediately to voicemail. Dad, it's Jake! We just saw— What the hell are you doing? Call us back! This is insane!" Evelyn grabbed the phone from him. "Arthur Miller, you pick up this phone right now. You have lost your mind." Straight to voicemail again. For the next hour, they descended into a spiral of panic, calling again and again. My phone remained silent. Sometime around their 20th call, they realized it had been turned off. The silence was more terrifying than any argument would have been. Meanwhile, a firestorm was erupting on social media. Friends from Evelyn's book club were posting the news clip. Former high school classmates of Jake's were sharing it with shocked emojis. The community Facebook group was exploding with comments, residents recognizing the house, expressing disgust and disbelief at their behavior. "Look at this," Jake said, his voice shaking as he showed his mother his phone. "They're calling us ghouls, monsters. They're saying we deserve this." The reality of their situation began to crash down on them with the force of a physical blow. The house wasn't theirs. The bank accounts were not in their names. Jake had never held a job for longer than 6 months. Evelyn hadn't worked since the 1980s. Their entire comfortable existence had been a long-term loan from a man they had treated as an inconvenience. By 10 p.m., they had left 67 voicemails and an avalanche of texts ranging from furious to begging. "He's had a breakdown," Jake said, pacing the living room like a caged animal. "The surgery? It must have damaged his brain. He's not legally competent." "Or maybe," Evelyn whispered, staring at the darkened screen of the television, "he's more competent than he's ever been." They stayed up all night, watching the driveway like vultures, waiting for my car to appear. The house, which had so recently been their playground, now felt like a gilded cage, and the clock was ticking. They knew deep down that the man who would eventually walk through that door would not be the man who had left in an ambulance weeks ago. The doormat was gone, and they had no idea who or what had taken his place. They were waiting, a two-person tribunal ready to pass judgment, when I walked through the front door at precisely 8:30 a.m. They had positioned themselves in the entryway, a desperate and pathetic barricade between me and my kitchen. "Dad." Jake's voice was an explosive mix of anger and fear. "What is the meaning of this? You're making us a laughingstock. We are your family." I calmly took off my coat and hung it on the hook, the same way I had for 20 years. "Family," I said, the word tasting like ash in my mouth. An interesting choice of words. When I was lying in a hospital bed with my chest cracked open, did either of you function as family? "We were worried sick," Evelyn stammered, her performance unconvincing even to herself. "We were just so overwhelmed we didn't know what to do." "So overwhelmed you found time to order champagne? So overwhelmed my son couldn't step away from his video game? You told me to stay in the hospital, Evelyn, because it was paradise without me. Is that what a worried wife says?" My voice was flat, devoid of emotion, and it terrified them more than shouting ever could. They had prepared for a fight, for tears, for a dramatic scene they could manipulate. They were not prepared for this cold, surgical calm. "That was a joke, Dad. A stupid, tasteless joke," Jake pleaded, his prepared script falling apart. 67 phone calls last night, I observed, walking past them as if they were pieces of furniture. "It's remarkable how quickly you can find the time to call when your free ride is pulling out of the station." They scrambled after me into the kitchen, a frantic, chaotic duet of excuses and accusations. "You're not thinking clearly, Art. The doctors must have done something to you. We love you. How can you do this to people who love you?" I methodically measured coffee grounds into the filter, ignoring their hysteria. When Evelyn finally made the mistake of grabbing my arm, I looked down at her hand, then back up to her face with an expression so foreign, so utterly detached, that she recoiled as if she'd touched a hot stove. I poured water into the coffee maker and turned to face them. "You have 24 hours to pack your things and vacate my property." The words landed in the room with the force of a physical blow. Susan stumbled back as if struck. Jake's jaw went slack. "Vacate? Where would we go?" Evelyn's voice was a strangled whisper. "We don't have any money!" That is, for the first time in 45 years, no longer my concern. The complete absence of malice in my voice was the most terrifying part. This wasn't revenge. This was an audit, a simple balancing of the books, and their accounts were empty. "You can't do this," Jake finally roared, finding his voice. "I am your son. This is my home." "Your home?" I turned to him, my gaze unwavering. "When was the last time you paid a bill in this house, Jake? The mortgage, the utilities, the property tax? When have you ever contributed anything besides entitlement and dirty laundry?" He opened his mouth, then closed it. The truth was a gag in his throat. Evelyn switched tactics, summoning tears. "Art, darling, I know we messed up. I know I said a terrible thing, but we have 45 years of history. That has to count for something." "Oh, it counted," I replied, the coffee maker beginning to gurgle, the only sound in the strained silence. "It counted every single day, until you both showed me what that history was really worth to you, which, as it turns out, was nothing." She started to protest, to promise they would change, that they would appreciate me. I held up a hand to stop her. "I am 68 years old, Evelyn. My second chance at life is not going to be wasted waiting for you both to develop basic human decency." The coffee was ready. I poured myself a cup and sat at the kitchen table, opening the morning paper as if they weren't even there. "The Foundation's lawyers will be here in a month to take possession," I said from behind the business section. "I suggest you start packing." Jake slammed his hands on the table, rattling my coffee cup. "You old bastard, we'll get a lawyer. We'll fight you." "Go ahead," I said, not looking up. "Check the deed. Check the investment accounts. You will find that your names are on nothing, because you have earned nothing." The morning sunlight streamed into the kitchen, illuminating their stunned, powerless faces. Their entire world had been built on the assumption that I would always be there, absorbing their selfishness, footing the bill for their comfort. The assumption had been incorrect. Evelyn finally collapsed into a chair, the full catastrophic weight of her new reality crushing her. Jake just stood there, his face a mask of impotent rage. I finished my coffee, folded my newspaper, and stood up. "I am going for a walk. When I get back in an hour, I expect to see moving boxes." I checked my watch. "Your 24 hours starts now." The front door closed behind me with a quiet, decisive click. For the first time in as long as I could remember, I walked down my own street not as a provider or a caretaker, but as a free man. Returning from my walk an hour later, I was greeted by the sight of packing boxes already appearing in the living room. They knew I wasn't bluffing. I retrieved the old wooden rocking chair from the back porch, positioned it in the front yard with a clear view of the proceedings, poured myself another cup of coffee, and settled in to watch the dismantling of my old life. The weather was perfect for it. "This is your last chance to see reason, Dad," Jake grunted, wrestling a large television out the front door. "You've had approximately 16,125 chances, son," I replied, turning a page in my book. "The account is overdrawn." Evelyn emerged, her face tear-streaked and puffy. "Arthur, please, I'm sorry, I was wrong. The message, I was just lashing out." "The truth is what you say when you're not thinking, Evelyn, and for once, I'm choosing to believe you." It was a pathetic, chaotic ballet of desperation. 45 years of accumulated possessions being panic-sorted into piles of keep and leave behind. Their cars, a late-model SUV for her and a sports coupe for him, both of which I'd paid for, were quickly filled to capacity. Furniture, kitchenware, decades of memories they had taken for granted were abandoned in the house. Neighbors slowed their cars as they drove by, their curiosity piqued by the bizarre spectacle of a man calmly reading in a rocking chair while his family frantically moved out. I just smiled and gave a polite wave. The story was all over town by now. They knew exactly what they were witnessing. Jake's appeals grew more desperate as the afternoon wore on. He tried bargaining. "What if we get jobs? What if we pay rent?" He tried guilt. "Mom can't work. She hasn't had a job since Reagan was president. Where is she supposed to go?" "That sounds like a question for her to answer," I said calmly. Evelyn, for her part, tried to weaponize nostalgia. She'd bring out an old photo album pointing to pictures of us when we were young. "Remember this, Art? Remember how happy we were?" "I remember a man who was happy to sacrifice everything for his family," I corrected her gently. "That man, unfortunately, died on an operating table 52 seconds. At precisely 6 p.m., 24 hours after my ultimatum had been issued, their overstuffed cars were idling in the driveway. They stood on the lawn, two refugees from a life of comfort they had just incinerated. "I never thought you had it in you," Evelyn said, her voice a mixture of awe and venom. "Neither did I admitted. "Funny what a little brush with death can do for your perspective." They drove away without another word. I stayed in my rocking chair, watching until their taillights disappeared around the corner. The silence they left behind was vast, absolute, and the most beautiful thing I had ever heard. The house felt cavernous, an echo chamber of my own solitude. For the first time in my adult life, I was utterly and completely alone. I walked to my study, my clean, dust-free study, and opened the bottom drawer of my desk. Buried beneath old tax returns was a stack of travel brochures I'd been collecting for 20 years. The Rocky Mountains, the Grand Canyon, the vast, empty deserts of the Southwest. Places I'd dreamed of seeing but never had the time or the permission to visit. I had nothing but time now. That March, I took my first trip. I drove my old pickup truck, the one I'd kept despite Evelyn's complaints that it was unseemly, to Big Bend National Park. I had never camped a day in my life. Standing under a canopy of stars so bright they seemed to tear holes in the night sky, I felt a sense of awe that bordered on religious. I met a retired geologist named Tom around a campfire. He saw my brand new gear and smiled. "First time roughing it, eh?" he asked. "First time anything, really," I confessed. He clapped me on the back. "Welcome to the first day of the rest of your life, pal." In April, I drove north to Colorado. The thin mountain air was a challenge for my recovering heart, but I took it slow, short hikes that filled my lungs and my soul. I bought a real camera and discovered a passion for photography I never knew I had. Capturing the alpenglow on a snow-capped peak felt more rewarding than any quarterly bonus I had ever earned. By summer, my travels had become my life. The Foundation loved my story. Catherine Vale and her team featured my photos in their monthly newsletter, a running feature they called Art's Second Chance, where my story of personal reclamation resonated with donors and other patients. I started volunteering, speaking to heart surgery candidates, not about medical procedures, but about the importance of emotional preparedness, of self-worth. In a senior hiking group in Utah, I met Sarah, a widow from Denver, who taught me about long exposure photography. We'd spend hours waiting for the perfect light, talking about life, loss, and the strange, unexpected joy of finding new purpose when you thought your story was already over. My friendship with Tom and Sarah became the bedrock of my new existence. We were a tribe of second chancers, bound not by obligation, but by a shared appreciation for the time we had left. The story, curated by Catherine's team, continued to circulate online. I was no longer just the guy who gave his house away. I was an inspiration. People saw my pictures, a 68-year-old man with surgical scars, happily hiking a desert trail, and they found hope in it. The comments poured in. "You've inspired me to have a real talk with my kids. My husband had a bypass last year, and your story made me realize I've been taking him for granted." 6 months after the eviction, I returned to Northwood. The house felt different. Welcoming. It was my base camp now, not my prison. I was in my favorite local coffee shop, editing photos from my last trip, when a voice I hadn't heard in half a year broke the silence. "Dad?" I looked up. It was Jake. But it wasn't the Jake I knew. The entitled slouch was gone, replaced by a straight-backed posture. He was thinner, his clothes were neat, and his eyes had lost their perpetually bored glaze. They looked tired, but clear. I gestured to the empty chair. He sat, his hands resting nervously on the table. "You look good," he said. "Healthy?" "Freedom agrees with me," I replied. "How are you, son?" "Working," he said. And the way he said it, I knew it was a new experience for him. "Full-time. Graphic design for a small firm downtown. I got an apartment. It's a shoebox, but I pay the rent." He showed me pictures on his phone of a small, Spartan, but impeccably clean studio. "Mom is working too, a cashier at a department store. She's figuring it out." There was a long silence between us. "Look," he said finally, meeting my eyes. "I didn't come here to ask for anything. Not for money, not for the will not to come home. I wanted to say I'm sorry. For everything. We were wrong. I was wrong." This was the one thing I had never expected. "I saw your pictures on that Foundation website," he continued. "Camping, hiking. I never knew you wanted to do any of that." "Neither did I, really," I admitted. "I was too busy making sure your mother had her book club money and you had the latest gaming console." He flinched, but he didn't argue. He nodded. "Yeah, I get that now. We talked for an hour. He told me about his job, the stress of deadlines, the pride of seeing his work on a client's website. He asked questions about my travels, his interest genuine. As we got up to leave, he hesitated. I'd like to do this again sometime, if that's okay with you. I'd like that, I said, and I was surprised to find that I meant it. But Jake, this doesn't change anything about the estate. I know, he said quickly. That's not what this is about. I'm glad you're happy, Dad. You deserve it. I watched him walk to his modest used sedan, a car he had clearly bought himself. Maybe my actions hadn't just saved my own life. Maybe they had forced him to start his. I drove home, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the familiar streets. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Sarah. Tom found an incredible campsite in Zion for October. Interested? Absolutely, I typed back. Count me in. 6 months ago, my family had called me a fool. Today, I was alive, free, and surrounded by people who chose to be in my life. The house that was once a monument to my sacrifice was now a sanctuary of my own making. I had learned the hardest, most valuable lesson of all. Sometimes, the only way to save your family is to save yourself from them first. If my story moved you, please hit that like button, subscribe for more content, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Your engagement truly helps creators like me continue to share powerful narratives. Thank you for listening.